Good evening, students. All right, okay, that's much better. Welcome to Seaver College's Seaver Spotlight, Distinguished Alumni Speaker Program. And this is our fourth year already. I can't believe that this is our fourth year of putting on this wonderful program. My name is Tina Cho. For those of you I've not had a chance to meet, I'm the Dean of the College of Science and Engineering, so I want to welcome all of you again. So for those of you who don't know, Seaver Spotlight, we invite one of our most notable alumni back to campus to share their inspiring life experiences and reflections and how it has really shaped their professional and personal growth and success. So it's an opportunity for all of us to come together as a community to celebrate one of our most distinguished alumni. So this evening, we're honored to welcome Dr. Robert Sclabassi, who has had a great interdisciplinary career and who has demonstrated generosity, dedication, and service to the university as a member of LMU's Board of Trustees and loyal alumni to the Seaver College. So Bob's impressive journey in higher education started at then Loyola University, where he earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. So from here, he went and continued his studies and earned a master's and Ph.D. in electrical engineering from USC. And for Bob, a Ph.D. was just not enough. So what he did was he wanted to challenge himself further, so he went and got a medical degree from University of Pittsburgh, so an MD and Ph.D. Then he completed postgraduate work at the Brain Institute of UCLA, where he studied clinical neurophysiology. Okay. Bob's career has encompassed engineering, healthcare, academia, and entrepreneurship. He was an engineering manager at Space Technology Laboratory at TRW. He has been a faculty member and researcher at UCLA, University of Pittsburgh, and Carnegie Mellon University. He served on the medical staff of a number of hospital systems in California, as well as in Pennsylvania. Bob is currently the CEO of Computational Diagnostics and the managing partner of Clinical Neurophysiological Services. He continues to be active in research at the University of Pittsburgh and has a clinical practice based out of Allegheny Health Network. He's a little bit busy, huh? So Bob is licensed to practice medicine in 4 states, so no worries if anything happens tonight. He is a registered electrical engineer in California and holds 16 patents. It goes on. I could spend another half an hour just sharing with you his accomplishments. With his wife of 57 years, and I heard last night, Bob shared with me that they got married in their senior year. That's right, so, okay, you still have time. So with his wife of 57 years, Sherry, they have 4 sons, 6 grandchildren, and 2 grandchildren, yeah. So we are lucky to have Bob here tonight. Title of his talk is Life is Not Linear, LMU Prepares You for the Curves. So please help me to welcome Dr. Bob Sclabassi.
Thanks. Can you hear me up there? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Cho, for that introduction. It was marvelous. I wish I was as good as the introduction was. 60 years ago, I was a freshman here, so it gives me a perspective on the university, which is probably different than the perspective most people have. I'd like to learn a little bit about the audience so I can kind of tailor my ideas to the students that are here. So how many students are biology majors? So a good percentage of the room. How many are engineering majors? Oh, an even better percentage of the room. That's How many are math majors? Are there any math majors? Oh, a couple. That's good. 3. Okay, that's great. What about physics majors? Fantastic. Are there any seniors here? Ooh, wow, a lot of seniors. Amazing. What about juniors? A few juniors. Sophomores? Some sophomores. Any freshmen? Oh, wow. Well, I've got bad news for the freshmen. You've only got 110 weeks left of academic work before you graduate. So start working hard. I'm serious about that. You don't realize how quickly time goes. That time will just fly, and you're going to wake up and say, what happened? Where am I? One of the things that's really constant in life is change, and that's a truism. We hear that all the time. But I was thinking about it when I came up here on the Uber, and I realized I'm about standing right now where I used to park in the parking lot that was here. The smartphone wasn't invented. In fact, when I graduated, when I was a student here, the electrical engineering, all the engineering majors were 9 semesters. I saw Dr. Movihill somewhere back there. Yeah, he was a 9-semester graduate in civil engineering. One of my heroes when I was a student, a couple of years ahead of me. But, 9 semesters. There was Pereira Hall on campus. There was no San Diego freeway. Can you imagine life without the San Diego freeway? No Santa Monica freeway. Can you imagine a life without those things? None of that was here. Seaver Hall wasn't here. St. Robert's was here. But think of it. As an engineering major, I studied vacuum tubes. Has anybody ever seen a vacuum tube as an engineering major? Yeah. The old people have. But we had an elective in our 9th semester on solid-state physics and transistors, and boy, we thought we were at the cutting edge. Can you imagine what life would be like today without a transistor? So can you picture the change that's occurred? Just think of the 60 years since I was a freshman. What's happened intellectually, what's happened socially in this country. We had the space program was started in the 50s. Kennedy was elected president. Kennedy was assassinated. We launched the Apollo spacecraft. We had Johnson was president. We got Medicare. People can't imagine what it was like without Medicare when people couldn't buy insurance if they were over 60 years old. Start to think about all these changes. They're just amazing. They just happened so quickly. And then think about yourself. Think about how you were when you were in grammar school and you were a certain kind of person and how changed you are now. And then think about what you're going to be like in 4 years. If you're a freshman today, think about what it's going to be like in 4 years for you. The kind of change you're going to go through in terms of understanding ideas, thinking about how to explore ideas, thinking about how to express them. So it's really crucial. It's really crucial to think about that because that's what's going to change your lives. I remember when I was a sophomore here, I actually read a little book written by a guy called Norbert Wiener, who was at MIT in electrical engineering. And the premise of his book was that he said in 50 years, everything's going to be done by robots and artificial intelligence. And, it didn't quite happen in 50 years, but it's going to happen in our lifetime. We're all going to see this. So what you've got to think about is how and what I got to get out of this experience going to prepare me to deal with those experiences, and those experiences that I can't even conceive of, which are going to occur in my life. They're just going to occur. They do to all of us. And so you want to prepare for that, and that's what is happening to you when you're a student here. Now, I want to do one thing. I want to encourage people to ask me questions as we go along. So because sometimes I get a little diffuse, and so if you say, boy, I don't quite know what you were trying to say, don't worry. You know, we all know who those students are now because you all identified yourself. So I encourage you to ask me questions. So one of the things is that you know, if you look at the curriculum, the curriculum, there's two parts to it. There's the part which is your major, which is, everybody says, you know, I'm a biology major, or a biochemistry major, or a physics major. There's that part, and then there's the part which is the core. What are the things that the faculty thinks are important for you to learn and understand to further your development as a person? And these are some things, I remember when I was a student, I wondered why did they care so much about me learning to write, for example. We had a horrible composition class, just horrible. You had to really write. And this guy, I swear, he had the biggest red fountain pen I've ever seen, because I would get these letters back, these papers back, and they were just covered with the red ink. Why are they doing this to me? I'm an engineering major. I'm never going to have to write anything. You know, I'll write equations, and nobody's going to care if I can write a sentence. And I'll come back to that in a second. Philosophy. You know, why do I have to study philosophy? Who cares what Kant thought? Who cares if Bishop Berkeley got bit by his dog or not? I don't care. You know, who cares about ethics? I'm never going to have to deal with anything which is an ethical situation. Why do I want to spend my time on that when I can be spending my time learning more about vacuum tubes? So, you know, these are the things which really drive the core education. You know, critical reasoning, the ability to express yourself, the ability to write, the ability to interact with people in a way which is respectful. These are really important things. But there's something else that goes on at this university, and it comes from the Jesuit tradition of 500 years, and those are the things that you don't realize are going on under the hood, but they are. There's things that just are occurring, and you hear the words all the time, and I noticed when I was walking on campus today that in fact some of the words are up on posters now. And they're really important, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because that's what's really happening. You can go anywhere and you can get an education in your major. You can go anywhere and you can get a core curriculum, but you can't go anywhere and get this underlying foundation which will guide you through your life. And so what are the things that I think are important that you hear kind of in the background, but you don't, as a student, you don't understand what they mean, and you don't understand what they mean until you're out for a number of years and you've experienced a lot of the things that happened in life. So one of them is formation. You know, the Jesuits talk about their formation. But in fact, they're creating an environment where everyone in this room, every person that is a student at this campus, goes through a personal formation. It's different than the formation they may go through in novitiate or whatever their religious training is, but it's the formation of your character in a deeper way. It's just so fundamental to understand that there's this idea of, we want you to walk out of here with the understanding that part of your life is going to be devoted to other people. You know, it's respect for everyone. It's respect for ideas. It's respect for the institutions that are important. And this is part of the formation process. And it's so important to realize that that's a distinguishing feature in a university like this, as opposed to, say, USC or UCLA or CMU or Pitt, where I spent my years working with students. It's a very fundamental, deep thing. One of the other things that's really fundamental is this idea of magis. I saw it on the posters when I was down there, and it comes from the Jesuit perspective. It's do more for the glory of God, but it's also do more for everybody. Do more for people, do more for yourself. Focus on doing more. I'm convinced, I'm absolutely convinced, this is going to be strange. The marketing director for Taco Bell had to graduate from a Jesuit university, maybe from Loyola, because their motto is, do Moss, live Moss. That's it's magis. It's the Jesuit concept of doing more for people. So very, very important ideas. The third one, which you hear about on campus, in fact, I heard someone use the word earlier today, is discernment. Discernment. And it's a terrific idea. It's a terrific trait. And I want to talk about not only about discernment the way the Jesuits mean it, but the bigger picture of discernment, how that just fits into your life all the time. But it's about how do you make decisions? How do you, as an individual, understand what it is that's the right thing to do at any given time? That's the idea behind discernment. Now, there's another way you can interpret discernment. So you're an engineer and you've got a problem you've got to solve. How do you solve that problem? You've got to understand what the problem is. The conceptualization of discernment is you take the problem in your hand and you rotate it in your mind until you see all the facets of it. That's what discernment is. So it's a powerful idea from the Jesuit tradition that extends into engineering. It extends into science. What's science all about? It's trying to figure out what important questions are that need to be answered, and how can you answer those questions? So these are things going on in the background here that you're not aware of. I'm sure maybe most of you are, I don't know. But I know when I was a student, well, I met with a bunch of these Access students in these blue t-shirts a little while ago, and they're really smart kids, so a lot smarter than I was when I was a freshman or a sophomore. So they may understand all this already, but to me it was really, really interesting as I matured in my life to understand that I got these ideas from this institution in a way that I didn't understand that I was getting them. So to me, those were are important things. I want to talk a little bit about what I've done in my life, because I kind of said, life's not linear, and it isn't. You have a picture of what you think you're going to do. Every one of you has in your mind right now a vision. I don't use the word vision, but an idea. If you're a freshman, I want to major in human health because I want to be a physician, because I want to do this. But the reality is you don't know what you're going to end up doing in life. And you don't know why you're going to end up, at this point, doing those things. You're hopefully going to make the right decisions because you've adopted this idea of discernment. You've thought about how to make decisions, but you don't really know what's going to happen. So when I was a engineering major here, first of all, I came from a high school which was a non-science high school. It was big on languages, Greek, Latin, Spanish, English, history. We had the bare minimum algebra, geometry, biology, one course in chemistry, one course in physics, just the rudimentary stuff. And somehow I got my idea in my mind. I wanted to be an engineer. And if the truth were to be told, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have an idea what an engineer was when push came to shove. Today, I bet everybody in this room that's an engineer knows there's a maker's lab that's going to be dedicated tomorrow. And engineers build things. That's what engineers do. They solve problems, they build things. They figure out how to build bridges and run sewers or build smartphones or stuff like that. But I didn't understand that when I was a freshman. I thought, it sounds interesting. So by the time I got to be a senior, and I was thinking about what am I going to do when I go to work, I said, well, I'm going to work in aerospace. Yeah. I was big around here at the time. And so I went to work for Space and Information Systems Division of North American. Change. Does anybody know what North American aviation is? They don't exist anymore, okay? Space and Information Systems Division doesn't exist anymore. It's long gone. But what happened? So I got really interested in antenna design in my senior year and then in the 9th semester. And so I went to work there to design antennas. Okay, so I'm sitting there, I'm happy as a clam. I got 3 months of doing what I want to do. And all of a sudden they got awarded the contract from NASA to build the Apollo spacecraft and the Saturn V launch vehicle. Okay, so this stuff is, way before any of you were born. This was the early 60s. And all of a sudden, nobody cared about antennas anymore. They cared about how do you control spacecraft and how do you control launch vehicles and stuff like that. So I got told, well, you're not going to work on antenna design anymore. You're going to go work on attitude control systems for the Apollo reentry problem. How do you control the reentry of a capsule? And I said, that's great, but I don't know anything about, I had one course in control theory. I don't know anything about it. They said, that's okay. We'll send you to graduate school. So they sent me to get my master's degree. And so I was thinking, engineering, I'm starting to understand what it is, blah, 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 blah. So I got my master's degree. And by that time, I was kind of tired of what I was doing there. So I went to work for a company called Space Technology Laboratories. Nobody's heard of Space Technology Laboratories, have they? Yeah. They lasted about 6 months, and they became TRW. Now, most people have heard of TRW, but TRW doesn't exist anymore. They're now Northrop Grumman, and we were talking last night about the Aerospace Corporation. Well, the Aerospace Corporation actually spun out of us, Space Technology Laboratory, so there's a whole history there. But I was working on control theory and how to do things with automated systems. And I was really interested in that. It was very exciting. And I told my boss, I really don't understand this stuff. So he said, that's okay, we'll send you to get another graduate degree. So they paid for what was a second graduate degree, called it an engineer's degree in electrical engineering. And a lot of people haven't heard of that kind of degree because there aren't a lot of universities that give it. But it's kind of like halfway between a master's degree and a Ph.D. So I thought that was great. They'll pay for me to go to school. I'll learn how to do something better, and I'll have fun. I didn't know where this was all going. So anyway, so I get back to work, and and there was a department created by the U.S. government called the Department of Transportation, DOT. Brand new, 1967. And they put out a call for proposals. And the proposal was to study the Northeast Corridor. Does anybody know what the Northeast Corridor is? That's from Washington, D.C. to Boston, and how you control transportation in that corridor. And it involved a lot of things. You know, what's hot today? Autonomous cars. We were studying autonomous cars under this contract in 1967. Really interesting stuff. But we got studying, how do you control these things? How do you guide them? And I was using some mathematics called point process mathematics. So how do you idealize something as an event in time and space to try to figure out how to develop control laws for this? And I didn't quite understand this, but I got talking to a guy at the Rand Corporation who was studying the nervous system. And he was applying the same mathematics to study how neurons talk to each other. And neurons are, I'll tell you, are a hell of a lot more interesting than freight cars. So, you know, and I figured that out, that I'd much rather work on neurons. So I was offered at that point a fellowship to get my Ph.D. in electrical engineering at USC. And there was a guy that was a friend of this guy that I was talking to at the Rand Corporation, who joined the faculty there, who was in the W department, who was studying neurons. So I hooked up with him and got really immersed in studying the nervous system. Coming from an electrical engineering background with a lot of mathematics. And it was really very exciting. I learned a lot. I wrote I thought was a pretty decent dissertation. My advisor told me last year, he said, you know, you'd never get your PhD today for that dissertation. And I said, I don't care, I got it then, so yeah, take it away from me. So the point is these things happen in your life and you can't plan about that they're gonna happen. So I finished my PhD and I said, what am I going to do? And my advisor said, well, I've got a friend over at UCLA, and I'll give him a call and you go over and talk to him. And so I went over and met with this guy, and he said, you know what? We want someone just like you, and we can give you a fellowship. And then, so I got this fellowship between the NPI, which is Neuropsychiatric Institute, and the Brain Research Institute, and then joined the faculty there. And I was getting deeper and deeper into basic neuroscience and into clinical neuroscience. All the time, continued to think of myself as an electrical engineer. About that time, several years later, in fact, about probably about 1975, I got a call from people in Pittsburgh that said, gee, we saw a bunch of your papers and we wanted you to come back and talk to us. So I went back there and I started talking to people. I don't know how many know, but Pittsburgh is like a village. It's not a big city. You know, probably West LA is 10 times the size of Pittsburgh. It's a small town, 2 universities adjacent to each other, University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University. And they wanted to work together, and so they were looking for somebody who'd be willing to be a sacrificial lamb and work at 2 universities. And it was appealing to me because I would be in EE at CMU and I would be in neurosurgery at University of Pittsburgh. And I had actually met the guy who was the chairman of neurosurgery through being at UCLA when he had been a resident there. And so it was appealing to me. So I did that, you know, and my wife encouraged me to do it. She said, you know, I want to get my kids out of LA. I don't like raising kids in LA. There's too many drugs, there's too many bad things. So we moved to Pittsburgh. And then my boss in the Department of Neurosurgery said, you know, Bob, you should go to medical school. You ever thought about doing that? And I said, well, you know, I thought about it, but, you know, I'm not sure. And so anyway, I ended up going to medical school. And then I ended up doing an internship and some residency and was a faculty member for 25 years in the Department of Neurosurgery at the University of Pittsburgh. The point of all this is when I graduated from here, say when I was a freshman here, I didn't have a clue what I was going to be doing in 5 years. When I graduated from here, if you would have told me that 20 years later, in 1982, I would be a professor in a department of neurosurgery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I would have said, first of all, you're crazy. Yeah, this is not only nonlinear, this is chaotic. You know, it just doesn't work. So how do you get through all this stuff? You know, what are you learning here that gets you through this? It's the things we talked about. Let me go back to the curriculum for a second. So I was rewarded as an engineer through this whole process, not because I knew Euler's equation or because I could solve differential equations. It's because I could write a sentence. I was the only person in the department that I was in at TRW that could write a frickin' paragraph that made sense. You know, it just is unbelievable. You know, so value the effort you put into that kind of stuff as well as what you put into your major. Then how do you deal with these opportunities that come along? You know, because they appear out of nowhere. You don't know when some opportunity is going to present itself to you, and you don't know what that opportunity is going to mean. But what you do know is you've learned about who you are as a person. That's through the formation that's going on. You've learned what's important to you and to your family. You know, you've learned how to do more. You've learned how to, you know, the access students I was meeting with today, they were talking about how they had to finish a project by a certain time to be able to get on a ship to go out to Catalina. You know, and if they didn't get it done, they weren't getting on that ship. They got a tough taskmaster, and you know, it's doing more, putting more into it, and then discernment, figuring out how you're going to make decisions. These are really key things. All of these things fit together. Now, I want to go back and I want to mention the ethics part of it too, because when you work, once you're out of here, you know, we tend to think that our lives are not, we typically don't have to make ethical decisions. Most people, when you ask them, are you going to have to make an ethical decision in your life? Ethics is abstract. Who cares? You know, I don't have to make. But you're going to find that you're going to be faced with making ethical decisions all the time. You know, you're going to have a framework in how you're going to make those decisions. You know, a lot of the students I met with earlier want to go into medicine. I've had a wonderful career as a physician. I love it. It's one of the great rewards in life is to be a physician because people really open up to you. They really treat you in a way that's just not describable in words almost. It's so powerful. But you're stuck every day with having to make decisions that are ethical decisions about the people you are taking care of or about the institutions in which they're being taken care of. So these things that we think about, you know, you're being exposed to as students here are things you think you'll never use, but they're things that will drive what you do every day once you're graduated and once you're out in your career. And you know, I was kind of, I thought my education was done the day I graduated. It isn't done yet. I mean, I was on the way out. I was reading Whitehead's book on the art of mathematics, which is almost a throwaway book. And it's got great ideas in it. You're continually going back and relearning things. Education never stops. But if you think the day you graduate from here, you're done learning, then your goose is cooked. You know, you're going to miss most of life. So what you're learning now is what you're going to apply later on. But it's the beginning. You know, the kids that are freshmen today are going to graduate in 4 years. And I was serious, 4 years is only 120 weeks of educational time. You know, just think about that. You're 10 weeks into your first semester already. That's, you know, that's scary. You don't have much time left. Get to work. Yeah. But, and then when you finish here, where are you going to be? What are you going to do? That isn't going to be clear to you until you're 10 or 20 years out from here. You know, I'm sure the faculty will tell you, I didn't know when I was graduated from here that I would be a faculty member, that I would have had over 100 students work in my lab, that I would have had a clinical practice. I didn't know any of this. I just had no idea about it. What I knew was I got some good foundational education, and I got these things that I didn't know I was getting. I didn't know I was getting. And I'm sure you're getting them also. And so I would really encourage you all to suck everything you can out of this environment. Get everything you can. You know, your science majors, your math majors, your physics, you know, engineering majors. But, you know, there's a great arts community on campus. Get to the performing arts. Understand the music. I'm not talking about acid rock. I'm talking about, you know, the good stuff. So, but take advantage of everything, because it's the one time in your life when you can do that. When you leave here, if you go to graduate school, if you go to medical school, if you go to work, if whatever you're going to do, the reality of life catches up with you. And so, you know, this is the one time, even though you may be working very hard, earning money to pay tuition or to help support it, you know, all of those kinds of things. Set the time aside to do these other things too. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I really would encourage some questions. You don't have to be bashful. Yeah. John Page? Yeah, John Page was ahead of me 2 years. I believe he was was he in your year, Mike? Yeah. I know him, and I have a tremendous respect for him. And I think he just retired, is that right? Yeah. And he's been a real fixture in the EE department here for a long time, and was a very good professor, very, very respected.
So I wanted to ask a clarifying question about discernment.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I appreciated your visualization, but I'm often faced with trying to discern something, and I don't have the tangible in front of me. I don't have the ability to analyze all the facts or the situation, nor the amount of time that it might take to do it. So how do you know when you've gotten as much resolution as you can get?
Yeah, that's the hardest part of decision making. This is a terrific question, because much of what we have to make decisions about, we make with incomplete knowledge, incomplete information. I think discernment fits into that idea because it helps you organize all the information that you have. Many times, I'm a physician, I have to make decisions about something with respect to a patient, and you don't know. You just don't know. You've got to take the best of what you have and try to put it together into some way that it makes sense. So I think it goes back, in my mind, I still apply the idea of discernment to it, because it's how do you make sense of what you know and put it together into a rational framework. But that question gets to so many issues, because it really speaks to the major problems. You know, we had a Secretary of Defense a few years ago. I'm trying to remember how he said it, but we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know was the gist of what he was saying.
It is known unknowns and is unknown unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much truth in that, even though we all kind of laughed about it. But there's a lot of truth in that. You make decisions in your life with only partial information. And almost every decision you make is that way. So my wife and I decided to get married when I was a senior. We've been married 57 years. We were talking about this a few weeks ago because we share very common values. And we were talking about, well, how the hell did we know when we were 20 and 21 that we had the same value system? You know, and if you don't have the same value system with the person you're married to, it's an impossible task. You know, that's a big decision you're all gonna make. You know, what kind of relationship are you gonna have without understanding all you could wanna understand about somebody? So, great question, yeah.
Do you think that your diagnostic skills in medicine were improved by the prior engineering background? Were you a better diagnostician because of your engineering background?
I would claim I'm the world's worst diagnostician, but no, I'll tell you where my engineering, well, first of all, that's again a very complex question. Medicine has changed so radically over the last 25 or 30 years. When I was a medical student, you just memorized. Everything was memorization. And then you build up this body of knowledge through memorization. Today, all this information is available and readily searchable. So how you approach problems is different. And now when you talk to a patient, you can go out and you can figure out in your mind what you think is going on, and you can search for it in PubMed, and you can find the 20 articles that tell you what's going on while the patient's putting their clothes back on. So there's that factor going on. There's another factor at work, is that the way engineers think is very problem-solving oriented. So you tend to think more about, how do I formulate this as a problem? And I think that's a big plus. So from the standpoint of being able to formulate, you know, to me, making a diagnosis is something like, it's a combination of engineering and science. It's creating a hypothesis, trying to figure out how to solve the hypothesis. Now I want to make one other point. So the thing that I've worked in almost my entire clinical life and academic life has been the functioning of the nervous system. And of course, I studied electrical engineering, which is all about electrons and how do electrons move. Well, the nervous system functions based on how electrons move, even though we don't think about it that way, you know. But if you think about what the EEG is, it's the flow of electrons through a class of neurons in the cortex. So to me, the things I learned as a sophomore physics student, and what I learned in circuit analysis, and is exactly what I think about every day when I think about the brain. So in many different ways, for me, it's formed a coherent whole. Great question.
Thought it was someone else. Sorry. You talked about ethics and I'm in that same boat where I feel that I'm an ethical person. You know, I didn't need to study, but I was just wondering if you could give maybe an example of an ethical situation that you were in that you had to use
Sure.
your
Yeah, I can-
discernment.
Yeah, so the question is, can I give an example of an ethical situation? And yeah, I can. So I'm not going to talk about anything to do with a particular patient. I'm going to talk about something to do with an institution. And so I retired from the University of Pittsburgh officially in June of 2008. I hadn't planned to retire. But I got into a situation where there was some things going on that were, to me, incredibly unethical. So there, you know, they have a policy that if you see something which is unethical, namely could be hurting patients or violating the financial regulations, there's a path you're supposed to be able to pursue that. So I pursued this path, and in one of the situations it involved a surgeon, and I just got to the point where I refused to work with him. I just said, I can't work with this person, and here are the reasons why. And it turned out, unbeknownst to me, the chief of the department in which, because we were divided up into different hospitals, the chief at that particular hospital had been trying to fix the same problem, you know, and it was a major ethical issue. And it turned out that what they said was, well, what the administration said, we don't want to fix it, we don't care, he makes a lot of money, and tough luck. And, you know, and then there was a second part that occurred, and it involved a lot of money being siphoned out of a particular thing. And I said, you know, that's just not right. People are paying for these services, and I'm responsible for part of it. And so I said, you know what, guys, I'm leaving, goodbye. So that was an ethical decision. And I was able to think it through based on what I had. Actually, we had a Jesuit named Father Early who taught us, when I was a senior, taught us ethics, and I was actually, took my old ethics notes and looked at how he laid out the decision-making process and applied that to these situations. Now, to tell you that it's real, after I left, you guys can Google this and you'll find it if you Google my name. I was involved in what, I don't know how many of you know about what are called KTAM lawsuits. Those are whistleblower lawsuits because this one set of, these issues involved defrauding the federal government. And so I ended up being involved in a whistleblower lawsuit to try to stop this. And in fact, there are 3 parts to the suit. 2 of the parts have been settled with the side that I'm on prevailing, and the 3rd part has been in litigation now for about 8 years. So it'll eventually be settled. So this was an ethical decision, you know, about these are things that shouldn't be happening. They're real, and they impacted my life because I made the decision that I couldn't support it. And they were impacting patients' lives and the institution in ways that they shouldn't have been. So, you know, these are things you learn when you're here, how to try to formulate that. Because you're going to come up against this in different ways when you're not expecting it. Yeah. No matter what you do. If you go into engineering and you're working at Northrop Grumman, I can picture the scenario where some salesman's going to say, if you buy this from me, we'll give you a vacation in Acapulco. I don't know, you know. So you've got to be able to deal with those things in a rational way. She'll get to you.
What was the most valuable course you took at LMU?
Oh, wow. I can't narrow it down to one. There were many, many that were valuable. I think, I'll be truthful with you, the least valuable were the courses which I thought at the time would be the most valuable, namely the design courses in my major. And they turned out, who cares? Do you care about vacuum tubes? No, but the things that what I would recommend are to me, as we talked about earlier, the writing and the critical reading, philosophy, the ethics, mathematics, physics, chemistry, all the things that are very core, fundamental subjects, because that's what's going to stick with you forever. So, if people are thinking about electives, take electives that are really fundamental. Don't take ones that are, how do you use this design package or that one, because you'll learn that anyway when you have a job. But take the things that broaden your knowledge base. And not only in your major, but in these things that support your major.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your stellar experience with us. As a student, we really appreciate your perspective on the things you see. My question is, can you help me, if you don't mind, can you help me define 3 terms in your own experience? The first term is money, second one is success, and third term is millennials.
Millennials. Well, yeah. Success. Let's talk about that. Success is doing every day the things which excite you, the things which make you feel fulfilled as a person. That's success. Money is an artificial thing. I've been fortunate. I've been rewarded, but it was never a goal. I mean, my wife and I, we've talked a lot about it. We never looked at each other and said, we should take this job because we're going to get paid more than this job or something. It was always about what is the experience? What is it going to contribute to you as a person? So to me, success, money's secondary, doesn't mean anything. Success is doing what you love to do. If you get up every day and you say, no matter what you're doing, I want to go do this, then you're successful. You are. The third part was, what's a millennial? Yeah. Well, in my mind, millennials are students that came of age, 2000 to now. I happen to, I'm running a company right now as part of what I do, and I'd say half our employees are what I would call millennials. They're young people. They've have bachelor's degrees. A couple of them have master's degrees. They're just starting out. They don't quite know where they fit. They don't quite know what they really want to do. They're early in their life's journey. And so a millennial to me is a person that's in that stage right now. We had Generation X. I don't know what my generation was. It was goofballs, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, you're probably a millennial.
When you are in your 20s, compared to the 20s you see in your company, how are they different?
I think young people today are a lot more sophisticated and knowledgeable than young people were when I was young. I think, like today, the young people I was talking with from the Access program, they're far more sophisticated and intelligent and able to understand what's going on around them than I was at their ages. And I see the same with the kids. I call everybody a kid who's under 60, so don't. You know, they're just so much more astute and able to reason than I was at any given age. I'm not worried about our younger people at all. I think most of them, everyone, all you run into is terrific. And they work hard and they're thoughtful and they do well. So comparing the generations, I think people today have had a lot more exposure. They understand a lot more. They're more thoughtful. It's great.
I know there's still a lot of questions, but we have run out of time. So I'd like us to thank Dr. Sclabassi.